So, recently, Genshin Impact introduced a new endgame mode, Stygian Onslaught, and to be quite frank, the whole thing's a little bit kind of a hot mess. Originally planned for this video closer to when the game mode came out, and thought the video was going to be short, but boy do I have to say a lot more about it now than I did. I still don't know if this video is going to be super long, because thinking about this has led me down a much more specific topic I want to talk about when it comes to Genshin that I'll, kinda tease in the video a little bit because of how relevant it is to Stygian Onslaught in particular, but trust me that there's thoughts I have about the situation as a whole that I'm not bringing up here for a reason. I'm just gonna cut the intro short and just get right into it. So let's start with one of the bigger complaints going around when it comes to Stygian Sergeants. The highest difficulties of the mode are basically whale checks. This is probably an issue of difficulty you could bring up with several Genshin game modes, but it is especially prevalent here over even the Imaginarium Theater because of how much HP enemies have, even on so much as menacing, which is part of the issue here. It's not just that it's harder, since difficulty spikes massively between what gives Primogems and what gives non-Primogem rewards, some of which are very important, as I'll be discussing later. It's not like having a super hard mode for super premium rewards is necessarily a bad thing either, but well, we'll wind up talking more about some of those super premium wards in a bit. Menacing isn't even your top tier difficulty though, and the spike between it and hard is actually really massive. Incredibly strict time limit, massive jump in HP, extra limitations. If they turn even one of these knobs to be more forgiving, it would honestly be more of a balanced slope in my opinion. As it stands though, and this is coming from someone who hasn't beaten Menacing, so take this with a grain of salt if you want to, I'm not so sure there's a place where someone can beat Menacing can't beat the top difficulty with at least some effort, whereas the majority of the player base would probably be locked out of beating Menacing entirely, including those who are relatively low spenders. So the whole thing is a whale check, which, again, I don't mind there being a point in the game that's extra difficult and chiefly for the people who spend a lot. But, I kind of thought that's what Imaginum Theater's hardest difficulty was, but that is a rant for another time. But the whales are kind of pissed about this too, because the rewards for beating the final difficulty are not great. We'll talk about the basic later. There's one specific reward that's just a little bit more insulting than the rest, at least for me, and that would be the weapon skins. Oh wait, sorry, let me correct that a little bit. The temporary weapon skins. Yeah, that little addition on its own tells you the problem. There's a lot to unpack from just this. So, for one, a lot of the presumption is that the weapon skins are going to change each time, so these skins are truly just gone when the next reset for the game mode happens. That is incredibly fucking insulting for the amount of work you need to put in to get these. This is for the super well difficulty, the difficulty you are advertising as being ball-bustingly hard. And you can't even give permanent rewards for it? But I am aware of the counter argument. Namely, that making the skins temporary is a response to the controversy surrounding Realm of Tempered Valor's name card reward also being locked by the highest difficulty challenge. Okay, so for one, the highest difficulty of Realm of Tempered Valor, which was also a massive difficulty spike and one of the first events at all that I just plain didn't feel like could get all the rewards for, which is probably an indication that the difficulty creep might be in and of itself a problem? Almost like Natlin broke the game or something. I digress. People were furious about the FOMO, but when it comes to something that is being promoted as in-game content, that same FOMO is part of the equation. Stygian Onslaught is a rotating, permanent thing in a similar manner to Spiral Abyss and Imaginarium Theater, putting it in the category of endgame, whereas events like Realm of Tempered Valor are just temporary game modes that serve as something to do during the patch and get some rewards out of. I can honestly say that if Realm of Tempered Valor had the temporary weapon skins and Stygian Street Patrol had the permanent name card, one of two things would have happened. Either one, no one would be complaining about the temporary weapon skin in this situation because it at least wasn't a permanent reward locked behind what's perceived as a paywall, which is still true now, but not the perception that people have. Or two, they would still complain about both, meaning the problem is how difficult the content locking away these rewards really is, and that comes with a need for balance fixes. Not just to these encounters, but probably the whole damn game, but that is also a different video. But in theory, if the weapon stuff wasn't the only thing, I probably wouldn't have a video. I have spoken before about my own frustration with something that this particular endgame mode is involved with attempting to improve, and that's artifact RNG. And look, it's better than the initial crafting they did at least, but not by much. So you get these things called Dust of Enlightenment, and it takes 1 or 2 per reroll of your artifacts, similar deal to the crafting where you pick 2 substats, you want to be the preferred ones, but there are a few differences that make this a little bit better. For one, it is worth noting how the costs for these rerolls aren't as bad as with the crafting. There's also the main method of getting them for free-to-play players as well, which just requires you to use resin to get artifacts from the new mode rather than requiring you to basically roll into shit you're never gonna use. Like, this costs you resin you're already going to have a reason to use, while the crafting method requires you to waste resources in a way that you normally wouldn't. Even if this was the only thing you were getting from this system every patch, it would still be better because the percentage of what you can do with them is drastically improved, especially if you have one that's only shit because of where the rolls landed, rather than asking you to spend XP on some 3 flats piece of garbage that has no rerolls that are going to save it, and it's far better being thrown into the wood chipper for 1/3 of a completely random artifact than it and the XP for it being worth as little as 1/25th of one with a selected substat or 2. So like I said, it's better. You can get more from the higher difficulties of this mode, and you get a couple on the battle pass, which actually does help things, although it's still going to be slow going because the system encourages you to re-roll something multiple times. Which, I mean, I don't know, the way to go about this actually does at least make the RNG not automatic. The idea is that you're progressing this sort of pity bar every time you reroll, which will give you more substats guaranteed when you hit certain milestones. It's based on the dust spent, so it'll almost always be worthwhile to reroll something if it's at or below the threshold where you're rerolling, because then you have a chance to reroll better, and you can keep the old one if you like the old one more. My only real big complaint about this system is just how little of the dust you get, but that comes down to Hoyoverse being kind of stingy in comparison to Wuthering Waves, which doesn't really let you reroll substats, but lets you change the main stat of your gear with a reroll resource so abundant, and I'm pretty sure I could reroll every echo I've got right now if I wanted to. I would be at least content if there was a little more given out through the events, and I would want it to be kind of basically double of what they're doing now overall, honestly, but with the same methods of delivery. But I think what we've got, at the very least, has a positive long-term effect on the artifact grind. But now, oh boy, now I need to talk about the most ass-backwards aspect of this whole thing, and that's, well, I don't know what else to call this other than the time window. See, one aspect of praise I can heap onto this is what I call the rotation for the event. Basically, when it resets. Where Spiral Abyss and Imaginarium Theater do so based on the date of the calendar month, which, while creating a more real-world scheduling consistency, makes in-game rewards consistency between patches kind of skewed. Stygian operates on a per-patch basis, which helps the in-game scheduling feel more consistent. That is where my praise for the way this damn thing is scheduled fucking ends, though. Okay, so for one, it doesn't go live with a patch. It does so 10 days after. That's kind of weird, but whatever. Gives people chance to work on other things before getting to this. It's fine. And once it goes live, we can actually grind out artifacts here a little bit more conveniently, rather than having to go to a billion different domains. You do it all in one place and just pick the set you want, even getting some extras when you spend enough resin to do it. So it really does serve as a small quality of life improvement. For 10 days. And I can't say this for sure, but it seems like you don't get anything if you go back into it after the 10-day period. I knew there was going to be that 10-day period involved in Stygian, don't get me wrong, but I didn't know it would just still be there but have all replayability shut off for half the patch. Part of me does get it. I don't think they want to completely outmode normal artifact domains, but there are ways around that. Being able to grind for artifact XP directly outside of that limited window, for example, first thing that comes to mind, and that's only if we stick with the theme of the game mode being about artifact grinding. You're already fighting world bosses. What if you had an alternate method to grind those out? Maybe you suck against one of them, but you have a great team for another, so you get to fight something different for the level up materials that you need. And hey, it helps give newer players faster access to later bosses to level up the characters that require them. Granted, the more strict time limit is cringe in and of itself. Back when Spiral Abyss was the only in-game mode, it still gave you 15 days to complete it as long as it wasn't February, and now that we have more in-game modes, the time limit on finishing them is a lot less strict. So this whole thing feels like a massive step backwards. I think that aspect on its own communicates a lot of what I have a problem with here. For the step forward that all of this sounds like it should be, there are just so many steps back that we wind up in the same place we started, if not further back because of it. I like the concept of Stygian Onslaught as a more truncated grind for end players, but the execution on that unfortunately falls very flat for me. There's good things going on here, but either because they're afraid of giving the players too much of a good thing, or they just missed the mark on accident, it underdelivered on what it should be doing to help the grind in Genshin compete with a much more player-friendly grind. But, what do you think? Did you enjoy Stygian Onslaught? Are you happy with the new reroll system? Let me know how many times you'd need to reroll my nerd ass to get good YouTuber stats in the comments, and be sure to leave a like on your way out. But until next time, this is the effin' Boonslayer, signing out.